everybody, Aimer back with another installment of the big list of episode rankings for Mission Impossible. We're into the top 50 here. I will tell you, I have actually gone through and done the ranking for all 50 of them. I may have to do a little bit of adjusting as I go, but I think I'm there. And I'm happy with what I've got so far. Stay tuned. This is going to be interesting. Let's get right to it. With number 50, Season 2, Episode 23, The Phoenix. The IMF must stop Stefan Prohash, who has arranged the theft of an important alloy sample and plans to trade it to an enemy country in exchange for assistance in gaining power in his country. Alf Jellin is Stefan Prohash here. I think all fans know this one for the whole Prohash lives line. He does a great job as a properly paranoid Prohash who needs to be discredited by the IMF. Barney and Willie's talents as team members are put to really good use here, as the smart guy and the big guy, respectively. The other IMFers basically run a misdirection play so that those two can kind of do the work of finding this alloy sample. And the episode works. There's nothing too remarkable in this one, like Doomsday, which was previously in the list. That also featured Alf Jellin. And the misdirection and the way that the episode was structured was very similar. It's interesting here. This is not quite your typical power of 5. It's more of a power of 2 plus 3, and somehow that doesn't quite equal 5. But still, this is a good hour. This one is better because Alf Jellin is great. He's engaging enough that you want to see him taken down, despite some lameness. And there is some suspense with the ending, and it's not totally predictable.
Prohash lives!
Number 49, Season 2, Episode 18, The Emerald. The IMF must retrieve an emerald which has strategic information hidden inside, which is in the hands of arms dealer Victor Tomar. And they must also neutralize enemy agent Petrosian, who is also after the information. We have Michael Strong alongside William Smithers here as guest stars. They fit this show really, really well, and they always work well when they're on the show. The plot moves well. It isn't boring. One thing that I didn't like about this episode is that the IMF team kind of plays caricatures of themselves, which is a little bit lame to me. They're almost like characters out of a comic book. You know, Jim is kind of a loud, boisterous drunk. Cinnamon is a hopeless gambler. Rollin is the card shark. It's a little cartoony for my taste, but the episode works. And they accomplish the mission. Despite the two antagonists being fairly lame in the final analysis, they get played fairly easily. This is still also a good hour. This is better because of those two outstanding guest stars, Michael Strong as Petrosian and William Smithers as Tomar. There's good teamwork in this one. It really gels together from that standpoint, and it's a fairly fun plot. Number 48, Season 2, Episode 19, The Condemned. In this personal mission, the IMF helps Jim's friend avoid execution after being framed for murder. This is not a super excellent episode, but it is a good above average one. It's solid. There's good improv by the team as the plot moves along and they figure out some of the pieces. It's a nice finish to the episode too. It's one of the better personal missions, certainly, and it was redone in 1988 in the revival just as effectively with an added twist, which I actually like better from a story standpoint. This is one where there's more than the usual amount of time spent on IMF preparation. There's a lot of sequences of Barney preparing stuff and Rollin preparing stuff. It's somewhat forgivable because of the nature of the mission that they're kind of working on the fly here. The antagonists aren't dumb, but they don't seem to pose too much of a problem for the IMF in this one when all is said and done. This one is better than the Emerald in previous episodes because of the really neat gadgetry that the IMF uses. I love where they do the thing with the false wall, to protect Jim's friend while he's in the jail cell. Barney's use of the remote control car is awesome. And as I mentioned, there's really good on-the-fly work by the IMF here throughout the episode. Number 47. Season 2, Episode 15, The Photographer. An enemy country has sent 150 agents into the U.S. who are carrying a plague, and the IMF must break the code that is being used by Agent David Redding so that those agents can be identified and detained. This is the first episode to feature Anthony Zerbe, who is a frequent guest star. He is so perfect as the cocky, arrogant villain who needs to be taken down a peg by the IMF. This one is a slow mover for the first half of the episode, until Zerbe, as Redding, starts revealing his plan and his motives, and then the action really picks up. And his arrogance, of course, results in lameness and some schmuckery, as the IMF does quite a number on him to turn the tables. This is the same basic character he plays in all of his other roles with varying degrees of success. I happen to think that this is his best role. So this one is better because of Anthony Zerbe, definitely. Despite the character schmuckifying himself, he is engaging and entertaining in this one. Also, the IMF uses the end of the world gimmick, where they don't really use this particular gimmick elsewhere, but they use variations of it. And it actually makes a lot of sense in this one, just because of the nature of the plot. It doesn't look quite as contrived as it does elsewhere. Visually, it's good, and it's also sensible in terms of the story. Number 46, Season 4, Episode 24, Death Squad. The IMF must rescue Barney after he falls afoul of a corrupt police force who execute criminals and then dispose of the evidence. This is a pure A-Team episode with no female agent, which was somewhat common in Season 4. It has a love interest for Barney in Cicely Tyson as Alma Ross, who is a fantastic actress. She's a little bit wasted here, in my opinion. This is a fun hour. It has a few neat high spots. Pernell Roberts is the corrupt police chief and the main villain here. His tough guy act doesn't work so well in this one. Mostly, the IMF is working against John Schuck, who is the second in command, and who does the stuff that normally the big bad would do himself. So, frankly, Pernell Roberts comes off as somewhat of an ineffective, cartoony villain, who in the end is just a greedy schmuck that the IMF exposes. But it still is an entertaining episode. And the reason for that is, this one is better because it's a personal episode, but it feels like a mission. The IMF works as though it is a mission. And it has a decent amount of suspense. You can't really predict the ending. The interplay between Barney and the incidental character Riva, who he encounters in the prison, is really, really great. I love the personal touches between those two. You know, when they're in the jail cell and when they're on the gallows together. Really, really great. And also, of course, Leonard Nimoy gets to be the giggling slimeball again. That's always fun. Number 45, Season 5, Episode 19, The Cataflaque. Miguel Fuego, Premier of San Pascal, and his nephew and successor parent Ramon have made a treaty with a foreign power to get nuclear missiles that could target the U.S., and the IMF must obtain and expose the treaty before the missiles arrive. This one has an old-school feel in the way the IMF goes about manipulating Ramon, who as a villain is kind of lame and conceited, like many villains, but the IMF really do earn their win with him in this episode. John Vernon is, of course, entertaining enough that it overcomes a lot of the things which are maybe a little bit iffy about this, as he does in a lot of other episodes. At first, it appears that the IMF is very over the top in terms of the amount of effort that they bring to bear on Ramon. That's how it seemed to me. But looking back at it again, they actually don't use a ridiculous amount of extra manpower, and that is also a plus here. Sometimes less is more, as I've mentioned elsewhere. This one is better because it has good guest stars. Ramon Bieri returns, also Will Kulaba, who I always like, but especially John Vernon, who drives the episode 100%. This one has an old school feel in terms of the techniques that the IMF use. There's a very, very good sequence where the IMF has to do a switcheroo with the Cataflaque, and also Leonard Nimoy's work as Paris as the old man in the prison is top-notch here. Number 44, Season 3, Episode 23, The Vault. Finance Minister Pereda of Costa Mateo has stolen $40 million from the private vault of President Navarro in order to frame him for embezzlement, and the IMF must stop his plan. This is another episode with Nehemiah Persoff as Pereda, and you know what that means. You're going to get a suggestible, greedy guy who is easily tempted to overreach himself and just be a lame schmuck. But he's going to be really entertaining while he does it. This is a literal pennies from heaven plot, and it's predictable, but it's fun to see it play out. There's a reasonably good level of teamwork here. The safe heist is visually excellent to watch. This is one where I feel you don't have to think a lot about the episode. Just sit back and enjoy it and be entertained. And there's nothing wrong with that. This one is better because of Nehemiah Persoff driving the action. Barney's work in the safe is great, as I've mentioned. It's a treat to watch. And the last scene with Pereda and his henchmen on opposite sides of a door yelling at each other, that is a total hoot. I love that scene. Number 43, Season 4, Episode 13, The Amnesiac. The IMF must recover a stash of trivanium, which could be used to develop nuclear weapons, and was stolen from the U.S. by the hostile trio of Alex Vorda, Otto Silf, and Paul Johann. This one is undone by a fairly convoluted plot, which is difficult to explain to someone who didn't watch the episode. And heck, I don't know if I could properly explain it to you even if you did watch it, because some of the twists and turns are really kind of that crazy. This has a really good guest cast. Sadly, one of them is wasted. There's a lovely woman named Elizabeth Hush who could have done so much more in this episode, and I pointed out some of those things in my full review. The story also struggles because of the multiple antagonists working each other, and sometimes I feel like they're practically tripping over one another in an effort to jump into the IMF's trap. That's the kind of episode this is. But it's better because there is an excellent Power of Five vibe here. It has Steve Einert as Paul Johann and Anthony Zerbe as Alex Vorda, who are both excellent in every imaginable way. And, of course, Julie Gregg as guest agent Monique is super here. The quality of work of those guests and the others covers up some of the plot holes and the convolution of the story. And this turns this into a really good hour. Number 42, Season 4, Episode 5, Fool's Gold. The IMF must neutralize the plan of Igor Stravos to try and bankrupt a neighboring country using counterfeit currency made with stolen plates. And here we have Nehemiah Persoff again. We just had him in the vault. He doesn't have to characterize much, as he is practically typecast in the same role as his previous two guest appearances, but certainly the vault that we just talked about. Just like in those other roles, he's already diving headfirst into an empty pool, and the IMF just raises the floor. It almost seems too easy. But again, that man is entertaining. This one is much like The Vault, as I mentioned, with a few pieces kind of moved around a little bit. But it's different enough that its uniqueness stands out. It's another great showcase for Leonard Nimoy. He drives most of the action in his interplay with Persoff's character, Igor Stravos. So this one is better because it's got Persoff and Nimoy, and they're dueling slime balls here. And they do it so well. There's a lot of very well-written dialogue with some very dry humor. The episode is well-paced. Nimoy has a really neat sequence in the vault, which is, a little bit slow, but deliberately slow, and it works really, really well and creates some good suspense with the effects and the sound. And we also have guest agent Sally Ann Howes as Beth in this one. She's a really good fit for this particular episode. Number 41, Season 5, Episode 22, The Party. The IMF must retrieve a list hidden by EEPR agent Alex Vannon of other agents, and he has hypnotized himself to forget its location. This is a very unique episode. It has 6 agents. It's got Willie and Doug in a really well thought and cogent plot. There aren't any major plot holes. And in an episode with that many IMF members, as well as a lot of guest stars, it's unusual that there aren't plot holes to be talked about. This harkens back to old school missions. It has a very unorthodox but well-executed Kansas City shuffle as part of the mission. The team has to use a somewhat ridiculous amount of resources, though, and it's a bit of a stretch with the self-hypnosis idea to create kind of the premise of this episode so that the IMF as well as their opponents have something that they're looking for. But it's not too bad because there is, relatively speaking, some logical explanations for how that was accomplished. The only major complaint I have about this episode is the actual episode ending is a bit anticlimactic. Because the mystery is kind of solved in the scene before the ending sequence. But I still really do enjoy this hour. And the reason for that is this one is better because of that outstanding guest cast. We have Frank Marth as Alex Vannon. We have Antoinette Bauer as his wife Olga. We have Alfred Ryder as Mishenko, who is excellent. And also Arthur Batanides as Valenkov, who is always great when he's on the show. There's no lameness or schmuckery here, and there's a great sequence where Willie runs interference against the antagonist at key times, which is really, really well orchestrated. Okay, well, that's 50 through 41. We've got 40 left to go, and I think I'm going to take them in snippets of 10 until we get up towards the top, and then I'm probably going to have to break it up into 5s. Maybe starting with the top 20, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, stay tuned. The next installment is coming soon of numbers 40 through 31, and we're getting into some really, really great episodes here, and hopefully this will start triggering some discussion. I would love to hear from people about your comments about these episodes, because these are generally the ones that everybody enjoys. Please like this episode review. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I am very much looking forward to your comments about this and other videos that I've made. Thank you again, and I'll see you soon next time.